Good morning. You're listening to Instant Breakfast New Brunswick on CHSR Radio 97.9 FM this Thursday morning, January 10th, 2019. I'm your host, John Heinstein, and I will be serving up a big, greasy breakfast in New Brunswick music to start your day out right. Well, it occurred to me as I was putting together this week's song list that this is episode 52 of Instant Breakfast New Brunswick, which means that I have done a year's worth of episodes of all New Brunswick music. Who would have thunk? Anyway, we are going to celebrate with a very groovy album that dropped on the first day of 2019, and that album is a collaboration between Ceeb and PeBe Kafeen, an album called CDPB Microbrewery. This album is, get this, a hip-hop concept album and also an ode to beer. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? The concept is a story about a couple guys from the opposite side of the border. They get together, they build a microbrewery/bar, and that gives them a way to make money and drink and spit rhymes and have a good old time. Of course, it's a metaphor for the collaboration that happens on the album between Ceeb, our local Fredericton hip-hop artist, and a U.S. music producer named PeBe Kafeen out of Brooklyn. So, as I mentioned, this album was released on the first day of 2019. The tagline is, CDPB Microbrewery is that choice of beverage in the new year. And the song list itself tells the story of the microbrewery. Here are the song titles. Starts out with CDPB Microbrewery, Catalog and Tour, and then we've got Hoodlum Lager, The Recipe, Pilsner Projects, PROJEKTZ, Ghetto Pale Ale, Back Alley Stout, Street Corner Bitter, Sippin' IPA, Block Draft, and the dopest outro ever. Little bit about the authors. We got PeBe Kafeen, originally from Harlan, living in Brooklyn now. He's a music producer, music programmer, audio engineer, does mastering, digital media art. And he is one of the three members of a New York production team called Shognosis Lab Group. And they bill themselves as experimental music programming production team that is the think tank and primary music production crew of the indie label Push the Envelope Productions. They were established in 1995, still going strong. The other half of the equation is Ceeb, Eric Claiborne, hip-hop artist here from Fredericton, originally from Ormuckto, now living in Fredericton. He's got at least 3 albums out through BME Studios Canada. That includes his first album, Ceeb Still Down, the Claiborne Chronicles, emphasis on chronic, and 2018's excellent album, The Fifth. You can often hear him singing down at Wilser's Pub with Dub Antenna. He's also an actor. He starred in a full-length feature film called Skate Pool. You can check that out on YouTube. He's also been in a couple of shorts, Mayhem Beach and The Filmmaker, and he was actually in a French TV series called Le Clan. Got pretty inspiring backstory. Ceeb was homeless at one point, and he credits music for saving his life. So he got a start at the open mic night at the Capitol Complex. He was not able to stay in the homeless shelter at that point, but on the nights that he sang, a local DJ Scout, would let him sleep on the couch. And he credits that music for getting him back on his feet after that difficult time. And now he does a lot of volunteer work for the homeless shelter. Anyway, great guy all around, great musician. Let's start out the morning with some dope freestyle, little marriage of the North and the South, all brewed up by Ceeb and PeBe Kafeen. Here we go with CDPB Microbrewery. We're going to do 2 tunes off this album, one called Back Alley Stout, and that will run right into Street Corner Bitter. Here we go.
That's how we doing it up here. That's right. You take another sip of this shit. So good. So good. The Flatbush. Y'all know we about to bounce. In the back with a couple of pounds. Gotta serve it with the proper sounds. And don't even try to rep the underground. They don't ever try to rep the underground. Looking over here, we got another one coming. Seeking for a chance to be a number good stunning. Running up a tab, I like to be something. Never mess around in an underground function. If you can't pay, then that's it, hey. Never go play around with that ish, babe. Better that's a good one, now a bad day. Gonna switch the life up in a bad way. Moving for a check, gotta get real paid. Up and down in the alley, trying to get real made. Take another sip and see the plans be laid. This brew's what you do when you stand in shade. Making my choice with the beat of the track. Got the rounds on time and the mill laid back. Steam Dread be the name, like with coffee stacked with 2 sugars and cream. I'm sending it back. Y'all know we about to bounce. In the back with a couple of pounds. Gotta settle with the proper sounds. And don't ever try to rep the underground. Y'all know we about to bounce. In the back with a couple of pounds. Gotta settle with the proper sounds. I don't ever try to rep the underground. Y'all know we about to bounce. In the back with a couple of pounds. Gotta settle with the proper sounds. I don't ever try to rep the underground. Y'all know we about to bounce. In the back with a couple of pounds. Gotta settle with the proper sounds. I don't ever try to rep the underground. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. We living life for reasons or reasons for living life. Either way we gotta do it, steady paying the price. Trying to stay above the ground, fill my belly with rice. Got some chicken from a woman, so right now it's alright. The temperature's rising and it ain't gonna stop. We'll be playing catch up till we'll be at the top. Gotta prove it or we lose it and we just won't pop. But I'm a rockin' when I'm talking, this mic won't drop. I'm taking no commands, trying to make my own demands. Cause I'm living street corner, bake with change in my hand. Keep the peace of my behavior, got it covered in sand. But if you mess up my feet, then my feet go bam. I got a lot of anger and it's gotta come out. But if it don't, I might just have to run up a house. Going crazy with the daisy, shove a gun in the mouth. Pull a trigger for a figure, no music, no doubt. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. We on the street corner trying to change the world. Gotta have a better story for the boys and girls. At the same time, be honest, watch the love unfurl. Cause lately the messages are making me hurl. Yo, I'm here to inspire, set your life on fire. Make you feel the goodness when you touch the wire. I be just like you, never call me sire. And where we wanna be when it's time to retire. But until then, humans, we gotta keep it on. Cause it seems like they try hard to make us be born. And we like about as much as we like weed in the lawn. Word is bond, I'ma fight till my breathing's gone. I'm taking no prisoner, captive or hostage. Instead I'll rock around, that'll break up that bondage. Listen, we only got one life to live, and never got a choice on which fight we get. It's not all bad. 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 It's not all bad.
Yeah, that was Ceeb Dread and PeBe Kafeen off their brand new collaboration, CDPB Microbrewery. A couple of tunes back to back, Back Alley Stout and Street Corner Bitter. So we're going to move to Moncton with some straight up raw Delta blues. as it was originally done. This is Furlong and Smith off an album called Blues You Can Use. Their recording process is to try to capture that old-time blues sound from like the early recording days. So basically the studios just had one microphone. You couldn't overdub. You couldn't multi-track. It was a totally warts and all approach, and that is something that they didn't just attempt, but that they embraced it in this album. They wanted to capture that vibe and that feel and that tone of a completely minimalist live blues production. What they say in an interview is, a lot of pop music today is far too sterilized, as opposed to listening to guys like B.B. King. The recordings weren't always technically perfect, but you hear the soul in what they were playing. That was the driving force. It was that spirit that they were looking to capture with Blues You Can Use. So, as I mentioned, it's trimmed right down. There's 2 instruments, acoustic guitar and harp, and vocals layered on top of that. There's a couple of guys from the Moncton area who have had long-standing experience in the blues scene. There's Trevor Furlong, who spent 13 years on the road as the guitarist and the singer and the songwriter for the Glamour Puss Blues Band. Anyone from New Brunswick who likes the blues would recognize that name immediately. The other half of the team is Dave Smith, and he spent also years playing in blues bands from Toronto to London, all the way to the Moncton area, and he fronted a Moncton band called the Streamliners for the past 17 years. And it's an interesting story about how the two of them met. 20 years ago, there was a booking error. There's an old club called Groucho's on Mountain Road in Moncton, and the Glamour Puss Blues Band was booked to perform at this bar one night. As I got there, started unloading their gear, they realized that there was another band doing the same thing, and that was Smith's group, DC and the Streamliners. Once they realized that they had been double booked, they decided that they were going to play the show together, and that started a long-standing relationship that kept on all the way to the present day. So they continued to perform together in various capacities over the years, and now here they are with an album. Came out in 2016. It's called Blues You Can Use. We are going to listen to a tune off that album called Going Home. Here we go. Furlong and Smith off Blues You Can Use, a tune called Going Home.
I'm going home to see my baby catch a train and go. I'm going home to see my baby caught a train and go. Well, she lying on a cooling bowl. I won't see that gal no more. I'm moving on, never gonna see that gal no more. That old devil gonna run me up and down the line. That old devil gonna run me up and down the line. Well, he's gonna have to get behind. That old devil's gonna get my mind. I'm moving on. Mean old devil's gonna get behind. So say along. Ain't no devil gonna keep me down. Say along. Ain't no devil gonna keep me down. Well, grace of God will keep me sound. That old devil's gonna get on down. I'm moving on. Grace of God gonna keep me sound. Bells are ringing. I'm going home. Lord, I'm hearing heaven's bells are ringing. Well, I'm going where the angels sing, where the devil can't do his thing. I'm going home. Lord, I'm hearing heaven's bells are ringing. I'm going home to see my baby catch a train and go. I'm going home to see my my baby catch a train. When she's at my Savior's side, mean old world can't pass us by. Going on, mean old world can pass us by.
That was Furlong and Smith from the album Blues You Can Use, a tune called Goin' Home. You are listening to Instant Breakfast, New Brunswick, and I'm your host, John Heinstein, on CHSR Radio 97.9 FM. So we're going to go to Sackville now with an annual collaboration of sorts. It's a project called Conduct Becoming, and this is a project that began in 2001. It originally was conceived as a one-off project that was dedicated to the memory of a student called Jason Abraham. He was a Mount Allison student, died of cancer, and friends of his put together a compilation album with the proceeds going to Canadian cancer research. And so the album had an assemblage of different musicians, mostly from the Mount Allison University. And it was such a success that they decided to continue with that tradition. So every year, under the project name of Conduct Becoming, a group of musicians from the Mount Allison University put together a bunch of tracks, release an album on Bandcamp, and all of the proceeds of that go to cancer research. It's a great project, really. And it's always chock full of great tunes, all sorts of different styles. They just recently came out with their 2018 release. We're going to play a tune off of that from a student named Clare S. Maguire. She's originally from Bible Hill, Nova Scotia, but goes to Mount A, lives in Sackville during the school year. Psychology student there, and also a great musician. We're going to listen to a piano tune that she's written, which was also an entrant in the CBC Searchlight competition. Good player, good voice, really good sense of melody and phrasing. You're going to like this tune off the Conduct Becoming compilation by Clare S. Maguire. Here's a song called Rosemary and Thyme.
I first fell in love with the way that you hold your pen. Your handwriting matches how your hand slips right out of mine again and again. You dot your eyes the same way that you leave a room. Never in the right place and almost always too soon. We were almost as sweet as daylight, almost as soft as sunlight, but we were always falling just short of just right. You were almost mine, almost lemon and lime, rosemary and thyme. I smiled when you told me your ambitions, 'cause they couldn't be more opposite to mine. But no, I'm not dissing, oh honey, I'll listen and watch the stars in your eyes till you see them in mine. You are reasons not to worry. You are breakfast at 10 what's on my mind. Thought I'd get it right this time. You were almost mine, almost lemon and lime, rosemary and thyme, rosemary and thyme. So here we are, beside ourselves with potential. If it's not in the stars, does that make it all inconsequential? What can we force? Can we change the course ourselves? Can we deliberate and complicate and put nothing back on the shelf? What can I do to not go back where we belong? What can I do to stop writing this kind of song? What can I do? Complication come for me. What can I do to stop you running from me? I first fell in love with the way you your handwriting matches how your hand slips right out of mine again and again. We were almost as sweet as daylight, almost as soft as sunlight. But we were always falling just short of just right. Yeah, we were always falling just short of just right. You were almost mine, almost mine. You were almost mine. Rosemary and thyme.
That was Rosemary and Thyme from Clare S. Maguire off the Conduct Becoming compilation. So you can go to Bandcamp, search up Conduct Becoming, and find that album and any of the previous ones all the way back to 2011. If you buy that album through Bandcamp, then the proceeds go to Canadian Cancer Research. Buy individual tracks or the entire album or the whole set of albums going all the way back from 2011. Money well spent, great cause. So next we're going to move to Fredericton with Evan LeBlanc. He just dropped a brand new solo EP called Keep Warm. Many of you would know Evan as the lead singer and songwriter for David and the Dark, and also a newer band of his called Marion. This is Evan LeBlanc as he originally writes songs. So it's stripped back acoustic versions of his songs, how they start when he originally writes them with just guitar and a voice. Gives us a lot of insight, I think, into his songwriting process. In the East Mag, he's interviewed and says this about the album. Normally, when I write the songs, even for David in the Dark, they start out slower and softer like this new EP, and then once I take them to the band, that's when they find that poppy flair that we are known for. I had just thought it would be nice to keep some tunes for myself and leave them the way they were written. Just nice and slow, let the lyrics do the speaking. The acoustic side project is something I've always been interested in, and it just feels like the right time to pursue it because things always kind of slow down in the winter for us. Keep Warm is kind of a reminder for me to stay busy with other things through these colder months so I don't go crazy. Interesting story about him that I found on his website, that he first picked up a guitar when he was 14 and decided to teach himself how to play it, and how he taught himself was that he found an old pamphlet at a yard sale that was called "You Can Play Guitar," and that was the start of everything. Let's take a listen to this, proof that you can play guitar. Evan LeBlanc off his Keep Warm EP, a tune called Rainy Days.
put my pockets back inside my pants. I grab my glasses and find a shirt to match. Why do I feel bad about myself? Comb my hair and put me on the shelf. One step forward, right in front of left. I make my money singing for myself. Does anybody feel the way I do? When I catch myself, I'm thinking about you. Oh, 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 oh. Rainy days have never been a friend. It's cold outside and there's no time to mend. How can I know what you think of me? I put a jacket on and walk back down the street. Oh, 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 one step forward, right in front of left. Make my money singing for myself.
Well, that was Evan LeBlanc off his Keep Warm EP, just released not too long ago with a tune called Rainy Days. Since we're playing Evan LeBlanc in the form before it gets turned into a dynamic pop goodness by David in the Dark, let's turn to some David in the Dark. 2017, they put out an album called Converse Rubber Tracks Session, which they recorded in a studio out in Boston that was actually owned by the Converse sneaker company. And so they have a project where they do community-based recording. If you're an emerging musician, you can apply. It doesn't matter what genre you are, but you can apply to the studio for free studio time. You can record at no cost and maintain the rights to your music. So David in the Dark went down to Boston, recorded a couple of tunes. Both of them turned out excellently. And we're going to play one of them called Red Sands. Just a little bit about David in the Dark. Their first album, Fire, just an amazing album, received all kinds of accolades. Grid City magazine, for instance, said that pairing melodic sun-soaked rock with sparkling pop hooks and reverent lyrics, Fredericton's David in the Dark is one of the greatest gifts of the year. And then CBC Music said, New Brunswick is all the better for this band. David in the Dark is Evan LeBlanc. Jane Blanchard also put out an excellent album last year. Dylan Ward, Kevin Bellier, and Stefan Westner, who's got drum work on tons of releases in the Fredericton area. So let's listen to David in the Dark off their Converse Rubber Tracks Session, a tune called Red Sand.
Out the window, through the woods, we used to spend I always wonder why. Red sand on the eye. Red sand on the eye. Red sand on the eye.
You're listening to Instant Breakfast New Brunswick, and that was the track Red Sand off David in the Dark. We're going to go to St. John next with a brand new album just dropped last week by Sweet Goose 64. They're an ambient electronica band. Sean Goff and Zoe Ritchie. It's ambient music, but you can also dance to it. They bill themselves as a guy-gal electro-clash duo from the Port City. We come in hot, frosty, and sweet. This is music for the MS Paint artist, which I think insinuates that it's minimalist, but that you can still create alluring things out of that simplicity. Let's listen to the track Eco-Malt off their brand new album, 64 OS. That was Sweet Goose 64 off the album 64 OS with a tune called Eco-Malt. Well, a punk album just dropped the end of 2018 out of Moncton. It is a super lo-fi but all-woman punk band, and in perfect punk form. They thumb their nose at the glossiness and prettiness of commercial radio, and they deliver up one onslaught of messy and raw goodness. Also in true punk form, you can download their album digitally, but you can also get the album on cassette. Interesting fact that I read recently, that the cassette album format seems to be making a comeback. I think sales were up by 25% last year. So along with vinyl, the old formats are having their heyday yet again. Of course, I Googled the name Klackers. It was an unusual name, but it had the ring of familiarity. And one of the first hits that I got when I Googled it was this series of commercials, TV commercials from the 1970s. And it was for a toy. And I remember these toys because I was around in the 70s. It was a toy that was recalled shortly after its release, and it was called Klackers. They kind of look like bolas, you know, the weapon. There's two like hard plastic balls. They're connected by a string, and you kind of swing them up and down. And if you get the rhythm just perfectly, then they make this clacking sound. I can understand why they were called for safety reasons, because basically they're bolas, so they could easily be used as weapons. So I can imagine there were quite a few goose eggs that came from using Klackers. And if you listen to this YouTube video that I hit, it's like all of the Klackers versions in sequence, and the very last one mentions that some safety improvements have been made to it. Anyway, it was put out of business for those safety reasons. Maybe this is just symptomatic of my mind, but I couldn't help but notice that the toy looked an awful lot like a set of male genitalia. You know, again, I Googled Klackers and looked a little farther down in the hit results. Urban Dictionary makes that connection. That is a term for male genitalia, Klackers, along with a few other ones that aren't safe for the airwaves. But I thought, that is a pretty funny name for an all-woman band. Let's listen to the Klackers off their self-titled album, a tune called Why. That was punk band The Klackers out of Moncton. their self-titled album, a tune called Why. So we're going to go back in time to 2011 for this next tune. Band called Snailhouse, and that band is actually a collective for a well-known singer-songwriter named Michael Furlong. He's originally from Moncton, now living in Toronto, and Snailhouse was a collective that he formed, had kind of like a shifting membership musicians, put out a number of albums before he went permanently by the name Michael Furlong. Some of the members of Snailhouse in the past have been like Julie Dwara from Eric's Trip and Julie and the Wooden Stars. On this particular album, he's got some musicians who are very well known to people in the Fredericton area. Mike Bellier on drums and percussion. Then we got a couple of Olympic symphonium players, Nick Cobham on guitar and vocals, and Kyle Kunjak on electric and upright bass. He's been playing for 25 years, Michael Furlong. Says he's half singer-songwriter, half experimental guitar player. Very critically acclaimed. I'm just going to read a couple of quotes that I've pulled off the internet. Globe and Mail calls him a national treasure. Stereo Gum says, heaving and gorgeous, anguishing and contemplative, calls him one of this country's most talented songwriters. CBC Music says, simultaneously heartfelt and apathetic, sacred and profane. And Bob Merzero says, it's all in the songwriting, always his forte, and stronger than ever. I could go on. You know, he's very, very well-loved musician, great songs. We're going to listen to something off of his Snailhouse collective, an album called Sentimental Gentleman, a tune called Airwaves. Here we go.
We'll laugh out loud at the money we spend, longing for the things others live to forget, working and paying the rent, surfing on the airwaves with the trust fund kids, getting kicked down the hallway with a dented lid. Either way, you're the only one who knows what you did. Tchaikovsky and Mozart, Debussy and Brahms, if born at the right time, would have driven Trans Am's. A macho staccato of ham-fisted flams, a symphony of opening cans, surfing on the airwaves with the trust fund kids, or getting kicked down the hallway with a dented lid. Either way, you're the only one who knows what you did.
That was Snailhouse, Michael Furstack, some members of the Olympic Symphonium, off the album Sentimental Gentleman, a tune called Airwaves. You've been listening to Instant Breakfast New Brunswick, CHSR Radio 97.9 FM, Thursday, January 10th. I am your host, John Heinstein. We have time for at least one more tune, so we are going to go to Fredericton with this one. I was at a health food store, I don't know, earlier this year, and I met a guy there, started chatting to him, named Chris Winters. Found out that he was in a band, pointed me to his tunes, and I made a note that I've got to play this on Instant Breakfast New Brunswick sometime. He's got a band called Winters Howl, and it's a thrash metal band. It originated as the band Monster Zero way back in 2007. Chris Winters and a guy named Galactic Wolf and Dan Thor the Red and Thundercracker. I got to give them extra credits, you know, at least in my book, for having stage names. It's always a good thing when you're a thrash metal band, or any kind of band for that matter. At some point, that band broke up due to personal differences, and they crossed paths years later, started revisiting their old tunes. And this is a quote from their website. Soon, the former songs of Monster Zero were shining punk thrash masterpieces. So eventually they ended up in the recording studio, and the album Wolves of the Northstar was born. Got a slightly different configuration, still Chris Winters and Galactic Wolf, and they also have a guy named Ruckus on guitar and backing vocals. These guys are really excellent musicians. They play really fast, but they play really well, and they really capture the spirit of thrash music. So we're going to listen to a tune off of Wolves of the Northstar called Night of the Wolves. Here we are, Winters Howl.